Welcome to part 6 and the final part of this Blender tutorial series where we're creating this Tesla Cybertruck. If you haven't seen the previous parts, you can check out the tutorial playlist with the link in the video description. So this is the final part, and in this part we're going to be doing the lighting, the materials, the rendering, and the compositing. And if you're interested in purchasing all of the finished tutorial project files to get the final renders, the finished Blender file, and all the textures and references, then you can purchase it with the links in the description on my Gumroad store and Patreon page. And one more thing before we start this part, I want to let you know about my Light Gobo asset pack. In this Light Gobo asset pack, you will get 150 Light Gobos, pre-set up for Blender's asset browser with custom thumbnails, sorted catalogs, and customizable settings for each light. Light Gobos are a great way to add realistic shadow patterns to your 3D renders, like light through a window or sunlight shining through trees, branches, and leaves. The Light Gobos all have custom thumbnails in the asset browser, and all the assets are sorted into catalogs, including cactus, chains, city, clouds, fence, flags, grass, hands, leaves, people, shapes, stained glass, textures, trees, vines and ivy, window trees, windows, and words. Each Light Gobo can be customized by changing the default spotlight settings in Blender's Light Settings panel, but the Light Gobos have also been created as a custom node group with more custom settings. All the links to the product pages will be in the description. So first what I'm going to do is go to the render properties, and I'm going to be using the Cycles rendering engine because I am going for a realistic result. And then I'm going to go down here to the color management, and I like using the view transform of Filmic. I think that just looks really nice. I like the Filmic better than AGX. I find that some of the colors look a little bit weird and washed out with AGX. You could use AGX if you want to, but I'm going to be using Filmic. And then here on the look, I'm going to be changing this to a very high contrast to make the colors more saturated. Also on the Film tab, we can turn on the transparent button, and that way we can render like a shadow catcher underneath it, and then the compositing we can just add like a plain gray color or whatever color you want, or just add whatever background you want in the compositor. Now also here on the output properties, I'm going to be using the resolution of 2560 by 1440, so that's like 1080p, but it's like double, so I'm basically just doubling it so it's a much larger image, and that's also the resolution of my monitor, so I just like rendering with a bit higher resolution. So now let's add in the HDRI lighting. So I'll go here to the world properties, and right here on the surface, you can click on the yellow dot next to color, and we'll choose environment texture, and then let's open a texture. And the HDRI that I'm going to be using is the Dam Bridge 1K HDRI from polyhaven.com. So link is in the video description if you want to download it, and let's just open the image. So we'll go into the rendered viewport mode to just see how that's looking. So you can see it creates some nice, just basic lighting. I do like how it looks, and with it out transparent, you can see here's what it looks like. So here's kind of the different lighting or reflections that we're getting, but I am going to keep on the transparent button. Now I do want to rotate the HDRI, so we're going to go here to the shading workspace. We'll go into the rendered view, and instead of using the object shader, we're going to use the world shader nodes. And let's click on this HDRI, and I do want to enable the Node Wrangler add-on. So click on edit, and we'll go to the preferences, and then over here on the add-ons tab, we're going to search for node and just enable the Node Wrangler add-on. So with the Node Wrangler enabled, we're going to hit Control T. That's going to add the texture coordinate and mapping nodes so that we can kind of move around the HDRI. And so what I can do is use this Z value to kind of rotate the HDRI around. So it is hard to see like a huge difference. Once we add like a very reflective material to the Cybertruck, you'll be able to see kind of the reflections better. Let's just do that right now. So I'm going to select the metal. We'll add a new material, and I can just call this metal, and we're going to turn the metallic all the way up, and then we're going to turn the roughness way down. So now you can see there's kind of a shiny material. So now you can see if I change the rotation, it's kind of changing the reflections of the HDRI. So I like changing the rotation Z value to 240. I just like how that lighting looks. So now we'll change the world nodes back to the object nodes. Now also if we go here to the world properties again and open up the surface, I want to turn the strength to just like a 0.7 so it's not quite as bright. And we are going to be adding in some more lights to make it brighter. So let's go back to the layout here, and then I'm going to go to the add menu, and we're going to add a camera, and I'll just move my view to about here, and then I'll use Control Alt Numpad 0 to bring the camera to my view so I can zoom the camera in and out. I can also maybe rotate the camera up a little bit, bring the camera down, and just find a nice spot for the camera. Also, if I go to the object data properties of the camera, I'm going to turn the focal length up a little bit to like a 60, just to kind of zoom it in slightly more. So I also want to add a shadow catcher, so I'll go to the add menu and add a plane. Let's scale the plane up pretty big and rotate the plane so that the background is kind of straight. And we'll go to front view. We can go back to solid view or wireframe, and I'm just going to drag the plane down so that the truck is resting on the plane. So now we're going to go to the materials. We're going to add a new material to this, and I can just call this ground. And for this material, I'm going to turn the roughness all the way up to 1, and then turn the base color all the way to black. Then to turn it into a shadow catcher, let's go here to the object properties, and under visibility here, we want to click on shadow catcher. So now it's just catching those shadows, but the rest of it is going to be transparent. Let's also add a camera boundary, so hit Control B in the camera view and just drag that over there. So now it's only going to render what the camera can see. So now let's add a sunlight. So we'll go to the add menu. We're going to add a sunlight. Let's bring the sunlight up, and I'm just going to rotate the sunlight over just a little bit, and we're going to rotate it forward just a little bit. And here on the strength, I'm just going to turn it up to like a 2, so it's just a little bit brighter. But you can definitely see that sunlight is definitely doing something, even just with a strength value of 2. And then we can also take this angle here and we can turn the angle up to make it a bit more of a soft light. So I'm going to turn this up to 85. Let's now add some more lights. So I'm going to go to the add menu and I'm going to add an area light. Now let's move the area light, kind of scale it up and rotate it. And then on the area light settings, I'll change the type to disk. And on the power here, I'm going to turn it up to 1000. So it's a pretty bright light. And I'm going to go to top view and I'm just going to kind of rotate the light over, and we'll scale the light up a little bit. Maybe bring it back. That's actually a little bit too big. And then I'm going to duplicate this light and have one more kind of over here on this side. So you can, of course, in your own time and after you've finished all the materials, you can play around with all the lights, and I will probably customize the lights a little bit because you can see the reflections look a lot different depending on where the lights are. But for now, that's going to be the basic lighting. So let's now get into the materials. So we're going to select the metal material. We'll go to the shading workspace. And let's just preview the shader nodes. So I'm going to make a basic procedural material for the metal. So I'll zoom into the metal. And let's start by adding a noise texture. And then I'll hit Control T to add the texture coordinate mapping, and I'm going to use the object coordinates. Let's preview the noise texture, and we are going to use this to create the roughness map. So we'll put this into the roughness. So I want to make this kind of just a little bit noisy, but pretty detailed. So I'll turn the scale to 100. I'll turn the detail to the max of 15, and I'll turn the roughness all the way up to 1. So it's pretty detailed. So I'm going to drag these nodes back here, and I'm going to put the noise texture factor into the roughness, and then I'll preview the principled shader. But then I want to control the colors, so I'm going to search for ramp and add a color ramp and put this in between the noise and the principled. And so this way we can change the black tab and the white tab, and so you can see if it's more black, it's going to be really shiny. If it's more white, it's going to be really rough. So what I'm going to do is make both of these kind of like mid-gray colors, and if you do want to use the exact same colors that I'm using, then you can use the same hex codes. So you can see here on this side, here is the hex code, so it's 8F, 8F, 8F. And then over here on this side, the hex value for this is going to be 949494. So it is very subtle, but if I do preview this and zoom in, there is just a very, very subtle variation in the roughness because of that noise. So it is extremely subtle, but it'll just add a tiny little bit of roughness variation. And then also later on, I'm going to be adding in a surface imperfections texture just to add a little bit of smudges and things onto the metal. But now what I want to do is add a tiny little bit of subtle bump. So I'm going to select the noise texture and hit Control-Shift-D to duplicate the node, but keep the wires plugged up here. So I'll add a noise texture down here for the bump. Let's just preview the noise texture. And for this, I'm going to turn the scale to 50, and then I'll leave the detail at 15, and the roughness will turn to 0.5. So we're going to put this into the bump, so we'll put the factor into the normal, but then to convert it to bump data, I want to search for the bump node, and we're going to put it between the noise and the normal here, and the noise texture factor can go into the height value to convert it to bump data. So if I just zoom in closely, you can definitely see there it looks a bit bumpy, but I do want it to be very, very subtle. So I'm going to change this to 0.00005. So it's going to be extremely subtle. So it almost just looks like there isn't any bump at all, but this is going to be a pretty smooth metal. So I just want it to be very subtle. And then also I do have the viewport denoising turned on. So it's even harder to see subtle details because it's also smoothing out. So now let's add in the surface imperfections texture. So I'm going to search for an image texture and let's open the texture. So here's the smudges texture. You can get this from cgbookcase.com, and I downloaded the 4K texture. And also if you purchase the tutorial project files, you'll get this resource. So if you purchased it, you can grab it from the project files, and let's just open the image. So what I'm going to do is mix in the surface imperfections. So what we're going to do is search for the mix color, and we'll drop the mix color here after the color ramp, and then the smudges, this can go into the factor. Now on the mix type here, I'm going to change this to lighten, and then we'll just Control Shift select it to preview it. So the mapping is a bit messed up, so we are going to fix that later. But if I zoom in here, if we set this to lighten, now if I just drag the B value up and down, you can see if it's more white, it's just going to add the light values, and it's going to add the surface imperfections. So I'm just going to make this a very, very subtle light gray color. And if you want to use the same hex code, you can punch in A4, A4, A4. So you can see it's just going to be very subtle. However, I do want to kind of change the mapping, because right now if I Control Shift select the smudges, you can see the mapping is really messed up. So with the smudges selected, I'll hit Control T for the texture coordinate mapping nodes. And then you could UV unwrap it if you want to, but I'm going to be using the object coordinates. So I'll put the object into the vector. Then what I'm going to do is change this flat to a box, and then I'm going to change the blend to 0.2. So we're using the box projection, and the blend value is going to merge any seams or blend any seams. So it's a little bit hard to see, but if there are any seams, the blend value is going to kind of blend that together. So like there is a little bit of a seam there, so it's kind of blending that. So I just like turning it to around maybe a 0.2, maybe a 0.3, something like that. Now also on the scale here, I'm going to turn the X, Y, and Z scale to 2, just so that they're all a bit smaller. Now you can start to notice a pattern here, especially with like this smudge and that smudge. There is a pattern. So what I'm going to do is put another texture into the rotation, and that's going to randomly rotate the texture around. So we'll move these nodes up here, and then we'll drag the texture coordinate back. And what I'm going to do is search for a Voronoi texture. We'll drop it down here, and we're going to plug the object up to the vector. So let's just preview the Voronoi, and we're actually going to preview the color value. And so you can see that the color value has like these different little cracks or little chunks here. So we're going to put the color into the rotation. So now if we preview the smudges, you can see, whereas before you can see the pattern, but now after it's using those colors there of the Voronoi to kind of make the smudges here and there and kind of move around. Now one problem with this is that there are some seams that you can kind of see. Most of it looks pretty good, but there's a few spots with seams, but I really don't mind that. You're really not going to be able to notice it that well because it is a very, very subtle surface imperfections, but there is like a few little bits of areas where it's kind of sharp, but that also kind of adds to the texture. So let's just preview the principled shader, and I can just kind of zoom over here to the side to kind of take a look at this, and you can just see if I just wait for it to load up, there are some very subtle surface imperfections, and you can see it better if you go to the sampling and turn off the viewport denoising. I have the viewport denoising turned on because I just like it a lot better, because it just allows you to kind of see everything, what it's going to look like, but the viewport denoising does smudge things out. So if you turn it off, you can now just definitely see those surface imperfections. So very subtle, but it just adds a nice little detail to the metal, but you can mostly just see it in the sharp reflections. Now for the base color of the metal, it is going to be kind of like a light gray. So for the base color here, I'm going to be using this color, and the hex value is B4, B4, B4 if you want to punch in the same exact color. Now I do think that the metal overall just should be a little bit more reflective. So what I'm going to do is search for the hue saturation value, and we're going to drop the hue saturation value after the lighten here, and then what I can do is drag the value down, so that's going to make it darker, and it's going to make everything a little bit more shiny. So I'm just going to turn this value on the hue saturation value to like a 0.7, so it makes everything just a little bit more shiny. The other way to do this is to take the two color tabs and make them darker, and that's going to make them more shiny. But I'll just turn the hue saturation value to a 0.7. That's an easy way to just kind of drag it up and down if you're not quite sure exactly what you like for the reflections. And so that is it for the base metal material. Now I'm going to make the glass material. So we're just going to select this object here. We'll add a new material, and I can just call this glass clear. And why I'm going to call this glass clear is because we are going to have a tinted glass. And then this material is going to be very simple. We're just going to add the glass shader. We'll delete the principled shader, and we'll view the glass shader. And then we're going to select the top window, and we're going to also add the glass clear. And we'll do the same thing for the sides. So select the side and add the clear glass. Now I want to have this back window be a tinted window. So what we're going to do is go into edit mode. We're going to add a loop cut right here and drag the loop over just so it's right here where that little strut is. And now we're going to go to the face select. We're going to select this face here. And this model is actually a little bit hard to see in the shading mode, because if I scroll right over here, we'll go to the shading options and we can turn on the cavity, and I'll turn the screen type to both instead. And now it's a lot easier to see. So what we're going to do is select the back window. We're going to go to the materials panel. We're going to add a new material in the slot. And on the drop down, we're going to add the clear glass, but then we're going to click on this button here to duplicate the material. And instead of glass clear, we're going to call it glass tinted. And then for the glass clear material, we're just going to make it kind of like a gray color. The color that I'm going to be using is a hex value of BC, BC, BC. So then click on the glass tinted and assign it to that face. So if we go into the rendered view, you can see it looks quite a bit darker now. So now what I want to do is add like a really shiny black material to these little like window struts. So we're going to select these struts, we'll add a new material, and I'm going to call this glass black. Now it's not actually going to be a glass material, but it's going to be similar. Now for this material, I'm going to turn the roughness way down to like a 0.1, and then I'm going to take the base color and I'm going to make that fully black. So it's really dark, but it also is pretty reflective. Now let's go into edit mode and I'll go to solid view, and I'm going to select the little button here, and then we'll click on the plus to add a new material. And we're going to click on new, and we're going to rename this to glass button, and then we'll click on the assign button. So we'll go into the rendered view. So now it has that little white color, but I'm going to make it kind of like a grayish color. And if you want to punch in the same color, you can use 4C, 4C, 4C. So I'm just doing a little gray color. And then for the roughness, I'll turn this to like a 0.15. So now we have kind of like a little shiny button there. And we'll do the same thing for the back. So we'll go into edit mode. We'll select the button there. We will click on the glass button and then just assign that. Let's go back to the layout, and as we are adding all the materials to all the different objects, once I've added all the materials to that object, I'm just going to hide it by hitting H just to hide that, just so that we get it out of the way and we know that we finished adding the materials to that object. So I'll select the glass and hide that. We're going to hide this object and also the top glass. So now let's do the body. So if I select the body, we'll go back to solid view, and I want to add the material to the front headlights. So I'll go into edit mode, and I'm going to Alt select that loop there, and then select all of these faces there for where the front headlight is. And then also I am going to zoom in really close and Shift and Alt select that loop there. So this is going to be the headlights. So I'll click on a plus, add a new material. I can call this like white headlights, and then we will assign that. So let's go into the rendered view. We can go into the camera view. Let's go over to the shading workspace, and we'll just go into the camera view and zoom into the lights. And this material is going to be pretty simple. What we're going to do is search for the ambient occlusion node, drop this here, and we're going to put the color into the emission color. So let's open up the emission for the principled, and we'll put the ambient occlusion color into the color of the principled for the emission, and then we're going to turn the strength up to 2. Now if I just preview the ambient occlusion, you can see what the ambient occlusion is doing if I zoom in really close. So it's white out here, but then dark in here, and that's going to add a cool effect. But I do want to control the colors, so I'm going to add a color ramp. So just search for ramp and add a color ramp, and I'll put this in between the ambient occlusion and the principled, and then let's preview the principled shader. So now what I'm going to do is like drag the black tab over a bit, and then also drag the white tab over a bit, something like that. So if I preview the color ramp, you can see there's like that little black spot, but then it's mostly white. So that's actually going to give a pretty cool effect for the lights. So now you can kind of see it just looks a little bit darker. So it almost looks like it's getting less bright as it gets farther back. So it's a cool effect. Let's also turn the roughness down to like a 0.15, so it kind of looks a bit shiny, or maybe like it has a glass surface. So that is all the materials for the base body. So I'll just hide that object. Let's select this front plate here, and on the front plate, we are going to select the metal material, just the base metal that we've already added, and then we can hide that object. And now let's select the windshield wipers. We'll add a new material, and I'm going to call this black plastic. We're going to be adding this black plastic to a lot of the different objects. So for this, I'm going to turn the roughness down to like a 0.3, so it looks like a shiny plastic. And we're going to make the base color just a very, very dark color. And if you want to use the same color I'm using, it's going to be a hex value of 141414. So just a very nice black plasticky color. So we can just hide that object. Now also, if we select this object here, we are going to add the black plastic, and then we can hide that object. Let's go over here to the back. We'll select this one, and we're also going to add the black plastic and then hide that object. And we can also select the backdrop and just hide that as well, because we don't need that. Let's now make an inside gray material. So I'm going to select this piece here, So kind of around the back and the walls. Let's add a new material, and I can just call this inside gray. And this is going to be a very simple material. For the base color, I'm going to make it a nice gray color with a hex value of 323232. And then here on the roughness, I'll turn this to like a 0.7. Now let's go here to the front. So let's go into the rendered view. I just want to see how that's looking. So there's the gray material, and we're just going to hide that. We'll select the floor, and for the floor, we're also going to add the inside gray material and then hide that. Let's navigate to the front here, and we're going to select this one here, this one with the little front lights. And for this, I'm going to start by adding the black plastic material. So add the black plastic. But then what I want to do is go into edit mode, and it might be easier to do this in the material preview, so we're not having to like render it all the time because it is a little bit laggy. So we'll just wait for this to load up. All right, so we're in the material preview. So we're going to deselect everything, and then we're going to use the L key just to select this piece as well as these three ones. So we're going to have these be a different material, but these three and this long one, that's all going to be the headlights material. So we'll add a new material in the material slots. Let's search for headlights. We're going to add the white headlights and assign that. All right, let's save the project again. Now, taking a look at this object made me realize that there's actually a little spot that I actually forgot to model. So I'm going to hit Control Spacebar to go into full screen, and then we'll hit / to go into local view. And I'm going to zoom into this little corner right here. So what I'm going to do is go to side view, and we'll go into wireframe, and I'm going to select this here and drag it out, and then select this here and drag it in. So it's kind of sideways. Let's actually pull this a little bit farther back. So it kind of is angled there. Now let's add some loop cuts. So we're going to add one loop cut right about there, and then another loop cut right down here. And what we're modeling right here is kind of a little orange light. So we'll go to the face select, we'll select this face here, and we're going to inset this face. Then we're going to extrude it back, and then we're going to inset it again, and then we're going to extrude it out and scale it down a little bit. Just like that, and that's going to be it for that orange light. I think maybe if I select all of these though, let's squish it down a little bit so it's not quite as far back. So let's hit / to go out of local view, and what I need to do is hit Alt H just to unhide all the other objects, because you can see it's a little bit too big. So this is a little bit wonky. We're going to have to fix this because I just forgot to model this in the modeling part. So what I'm going to do is select this piece here. Let's go to wireframe. So we'll select these bottom vertices, and we'll just drag this up a little bit. Now we'll select this piece again. We're going to go into edit mode. We'll go to the face select and select that loop of faces, that loop of faces, and also that loop of faces. So if we go into local view and zoom in, we're going to select all those faces. Now let's just squish it down a little bit and then scale it down on the Z-axis and bring it down and move it over. All right, because it's a little bit too big. And we'll hit / to go out of local view, scale it down a little bit more, scale it in, maybe bring it up a little bit. All right, so just like that. So the modeling is finished. So that's going to be a little orange light. So let's go back into the material preview. So now what we need to do is just hide all the objects again that we already added the materials to. So the front plate, we want to hide the windows and the body, the windshield wiper. We also want to hide this side piece, also these other windows, just hide that. Also the bottom piece here, and then also this piece here inside the wheel and this piece here. All right, so now we'll select this object again, we'll zoom into it, and we're going to be creating an orange material right here. So in edit mode, we're going to select that loop and that loop and that loop, or just that face there. Let's click on back to previous, and we're going to click on the plus here to add a new material in the material slot. We'll click on new, and I can just call this orange light. Now, if we select the white headlights material, we're going to select everything and then just click to select one of the nodes, and we'll hit Control C to copy the nodes, and we'll go to the orange light, and we're going to delete the nodes, and then hit Control V to paste the nodes. So it's going to be the same exact material. However, it's going to be orange. So with all these faces selected, we'll click on the assign button. So now you can see that looks like it is a light, but then we're going to take the black tab and drag it over a bit. And then on the white tab, we're going to make this a very strong orange color. And if you want to use the same hex code that I'm using for the orange, you can punch that in. All right, so that is it for the orange light material. So now right over here, I'm going to be adding in my car reflector materials. And so I recently posted a different tutorial on how to create the car reflectors. So if you want to pause this video and go ahead and watch that tutorial if you haven't already, the link is in the video description. Also, if you purchase the finished tutorial project files of this tutorial, then you'll get the light reflector material, and so you can just add it into the Blender file. Or you can also purchase the procedural material on my Gumroad and Patreon. Links are in the description. So what I'm going to be doing is just appending it into the file. So I'll click on File and then Append. So I'm going to go into the project files of my procedural car reflector material. So we'll go into the blend file and we're going to go into the material and then add the car reflector material. So we're going to go into edit mode. Let's go into the material preview and we're just going to select these two squares right there and we'll click on the plus to add a new material. Let's click on the drop down and we're going to add the car reflector material. Now this one, I'm going to change the name to car reflector red, and here on the node group, let's also rename this to car reflector red, because now what I want to do is duplicate it. So we're going to duplicate this material, and this one I'm going to call car reflector white. And also here we're going to duplicate the node group and we're going to rename this to car reflector white. And then we're going to click on the assign button. So you can see now it's red when we assign it and it looks a little bit weird. So let's go into the rendered mode to kind of see how that's looking. But now what I'm going to do is just make the base color fully white. So just make the base color that white color. Now we haven't UV unwrapped this yet. So what we're going to do is hit U and we're going to unwrap. We're going to do the smart UV project and click on unwrap. And there we go. That looks a lot better. So now you can kind of see all those little details. And then we can change the scale, and I might turn the scale down just a little bit more. Something like that. So there we go, we have those car reflector materials. So we can now select this object and we can hide it. And let's go back here to the layout and we'll zoom into the back because I just realized there was another small object which I forgot to model. Yeah, giant car tutorial series is a really big tutorial series. This is already like the third time I'm making the car, but I still forgot a few things. So we are going to have to model a little like car reflector object, but it is pretty quick and easy to model. So what I'm going to do is deselect everything and then I'll hit Alt H to unhide everything. Then I'm going to move it. We're going to move it into a new collection and we can just call it finished and then click on create. So now we have a new collection just called finished, and so that has all the finished materials, so that way we'll easily be able to hide them again once we've finished the modeling. So let's go to back view by hitting Control-1 and we'll go to wireframe, and then what we want to do is show the references again, so click on the main reference. And it's pretty hard to see, but if I just select some of these objects and kind of hide them, just hide those objects, this is what we want to model. So a little cube here and then a little cube here. So let's unhide everything. So we'll go to solid view, we'll go to the add menu and we're going to add a cube. We'll hit Alt G to clear the locations and then we'll bring the cube over, and in edit mode we're going to scale this way down. Let's bring the cube up and then we're going to go to side view. Let's go to wireframe. Let's go to edit mode. We're going to scale it down and we're going to rotate it over so that it's aligned with the rotation of the back there. We're just going to bring it back. So we'll go to back view and we're going to scale the entire thing up sideways. So just scale it way up like that. And we can also scale it down a little bit and then bring it up. And then let's go to wireframe. We're going to box select the vertices here on the end and we'll duplicate this and move it over and then extrude it over like that. So now if we select this entire piece, we're going to duplicate it and move it over here to the other side. So there's another one on the other side. All right, so just like that. So pretty easy modeling. It looks like we need to recalculate the normals and I'll maybe bring everything out a little bit, but that's going to be the car reflector object. Now we do need to add some modifiers to this. So let's go to the modifiers and we're going to add the bevel modifier. Let's zoom in close to the object so we can see it better, and we'll turn up the segments to 2, and I'll turn the amount way down just to make it quite small, and then we will shade it smooth, and then just like all the other objects, we're going to add a weighted normal. And then one thing that I want to do just to organize the scene better is I want to kind of organize these objects. So we're going to go to the outliner and I'm going to select the sun, hold down the control key and select the camera and the area lights, and also the plane here, which is the ground, and we're going to hit M to move. We're going to go new collection and we're going to call this lights and camera, and we're going to click on create. So now we have another collection called lights and camera, just for all the lights, the camera, and the ground. So now we can hide the main references. Let's also drag up the finished collection up to the top, and the lights and camera, we'll just stick this right there. So now if we zoom into the object that we just modeled, we'll select this object. Let's go here to the materials. Let's go to the material dropdown, and we want to add the car reflector red. So we'll go into the rendered view to see how that's looking. You can see we get those really cool reflections. So if I just zoom in there, you can see we have some nice reflections there. And we also want to make sure we unwrap this. So if we go into edit mode, we're going to select everything and we're going to hit U, and we're going to do the smart UV project. Smart UV project, click on unwrap. So it's unwrapped now. But what we want to do now is scale it. So let's go here to the UV editing workspace, and we're going to zoom in to the car reflectors. Let's zoom in really close and go into the rendered view so we can see what it's looking like. And we'll select all of the UVs and we'll scale the UVs way up. And I just want to make it maybe about that big, so you can kind of see there's that texture there of the Voronoi. So there we go, we now have the car reflector object. So we'll go back here to the layout. So now what we're going to do is we're going to open up the outliner and we're going to hide the finished collection, just because these all have the finished materials. So let's just rename this to finished materials. Let's now select this back piece here. And for this one, we're going to add the base metal. So we'll hide that object. We'll select this piece here, and this one is going to have the plastic, so we'll search for black plastic, hide that. Let's also select the triangle here with the camera, and we're going to add the black plastic, and we're going to select the camera, and this is also going to have the black plastic, so let's hide that. Now let's navigate over here to this camera over here. We're also going to add the black plastic, and we're going to hide that as well. So let's go to the back here, and we're going to select this part here with the back lights. And for this, we're going to search for the black plastic, so add the black plastic. Then we're going to go into edit mode. Let's go into the material preview, and we're going to go to the face select. We're going to select this entire loop as well as these two faces. We'll click on the plus here to add a new material, and we're going to add the car reflector red and assign that. And then we want to unwrap this because you can't see the texture, so we'll hit U, do the Smart UV project, click on unwrap, and then we need to go to the shading workspace. Let's hit the period key to zoom into our selection. Let's zoom in here, and we'll select the UVs and we'll just scale them up a little bit more. So like that, so we have those cool reflective material. So we'll go back here to the layout, and I can hide this object, and then we're going to select the bumper, the back bumper, and we're also going to search for the black plastic, and then hide that object. Then we're going to select the bottom object, and this we're also going to search for the black plastic and hide that. Let's also select these little pieces here, so like kind of this trim up here with details, and we're also going to add the plastic and hide that. Now let's select the cup holders, and for this one we're going to add the inside gray material, and then we can hide that. Let's make a material for the dashboard. So we're going to select the dashboard, add a new material, and I can call this dashboard. And for the base color, I'm just going to make it this nice dark gray. The hex code is 1F, 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 and then I'll turn the roughness up to like a 0.7, so we can hide that object. Now let's select the screen here. We'll add a new material. We can just call this screen or monitor. And for this, I'm going to make it a very dark gray color. The hex code is going to be 191919 if you do want to punch in the same color, or just make a nice dark gray, and I'll turn the roughness to 0.1, and that way it's going to be very shiny. Now if you wanted to, you could of course like put like an image texture. I think usually they have like the Tesla Cybertruck, they show like a 3D model of it, and you can like click on different things if you want to like do the suspension, make the Cybertruck kind of go up and down. You can also like click on the different seats and then like turn on the heating and things like that. I saw some videos on YouTube, so if you wanted to, you could like add a image texture here on the screen, but I'm just gonna make it appear as though like the Cybertruck is turned off, or maybe the screen is turned off. So I'll just hide the screen. Let's now select the steering wheel, and we're gonna search for the inside gray. Also this here, we're gonna add the inside gray. So that center piece there, we'll hide that. And then for this piece here, so the two pieces on the sides, we're going to search for the plastic and add the black plastic and hide that piece. And these little wheel thingies, we're going to search for the black plastic and then hide that. Then for the little piece here, which is connecting the steering wheel to the dashboard, we're going to search for the inside gray material, and this one here also search for the inside gray material. Now let's select the mirrors, and we're going to add the plastic material. And then if we go into edit mode, we want to select these faces right here, and we're going to add a mirror to them. So we'll select those faces, we'll add a new material, we'll click on new and assign that, and we're going to call this mirror. And for this color, we're just going to make it fully white, and we'll turn the roughness all the way down to 0, and then we'll turn the metallic all the way up to 1, so that's going to be the mirror. So we'll hide this object, and this here, this is just the connector. We're going to add the black plastic to that piece, and we'll hide that. And I thought I hid this already, but the background here, let's just hide the ground. Let's now go to the front here, and we're going to add the black plastic material, hide that, and then also right here, we're going to add the black plastic. This is the front toe cables, so we're going to hide that as well. Now let's select the wheel trim. We're going to add a new material, and I can just call this trim. And let's go to the shading workspace. Now for the trim, I do want to add a little bit of the surface imperfection. So we're going to hit Alt-H to unhide everything. Then we're going to hit M to move, and we're going to move these into the finished materials. So put it in finished materials. So now we can unhide the finished materials, and we're going to select the metal. So select the main base metal, and on the base metal, I'm going to click here and drag to select the texture coordinate, the Voronoi, the mapping, and the smudges, and we'll hit Control C to copy. Now what we can do is we can hide the finished materials, and we're going to select the trim, and let's hit Control V to paste those nodes, and we'll drag it down here. And then what we're going to do is search for ramp, and we're going to search for a color ramp, and what we're going to do is put the smudges into the roughness, and then we're going to put the color ramp in between it so we can adjust the colors. So we'll go into the rendered viewport mode. Let's also change the base color. So I'm going to make the base color this pretty dark gray color. The hex value is going to be 1E, 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 FF. So you can see right now it's way too shiny, so we can use the color ramp colors to make it more rough. So on the tab on this side, I'm going to use a hex value of A2, 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 and then over here on this side, I'm going to use a hex value of AF, AF, AF. So it is a little bit hard to see, but if you look here at the reflections, you can just see a few tiny little surface imperfections. The denoise in the viewport is kind of getting rid of it, but that'll just add a tiny little bit of reflections, so we can now just hide that object. Let's now navigate to the bottom, and I'm going to select this metal plate here on the bottom, and we're going to search for the metal material, just add in the metal, and then we're going to hide that, and then we're going to select the bolts, and we're also going to search for metal and just add the metal material and hide that. Let's now create the material for this back bed thing right here, which kind of closes over the bed. So we'll add a new material, and I can just call this bed, maybe bed top, whatever you want to call it, whatever makes sense. And I'm going to search for a wave texture. Let's drop it here. Let's preview the wave, and I'll hit Control T, and we're going to use the object coordinate. And then instead of it being on the x-axis, I'm going to make it on the y-axis so they're going back and forth. So why we're adding this wave is because we're going to put it into the bump, and that will make it look like it has those little bumps there on the back. And we're going to leave all the other settings of the wave the same. So now let's put the color into the normal, and then we'll add a bump node to convert it to bump data, and we'll put the color into the height value, and let's just preview the principled shader. Now on the base color here, I'm just going to make this fully black, and I'll leave the roughness at 0.5. So now if you kind of look along here, you can see there's those little bumps, and I'm going to change the distance to a 0.003 so it's a bit more bumpy. But I want the bumps to be a little bit more sharps on the bottoms of them, so I'm going to search for the RGB curves and drop this in between the wave and the bump, so drop it there. And then I can click to add a dot here and kind of drag it up, and you can see this shape that we're creating with the RGB curves, that's going to determine the shape of those little bumps there. So I'm going to add a dot there, then I'm going to add another dot kind of right up there to really just sharpen that. So you can see there it is before and there it is after. So now we have those kind of little bumps there. So that's it for the material. It's pretty simple. So we'll just hide that object. Let's select the wheel hubs and we'll zoom into this. We'll add a new material, and I can just call this like hubcap. So for the hubcap material, I'm going to go to the add menu and I'm going to search for a noise texture. We'll drop it here, and then I'll hit Control T to add the texture coordinate mapping, and I'll put the object into the vector. So we're using the object coordinates. Now let's preview the noise texture, and I'll change the settings. So I'm going to turn the scale to 40, and I'll turn the detail up pretty high to like a 12, and I'll turn the roughness up to like a 0.9. I think the scale might actually be a little bit too big, so let's turn this down to maybe just like a 20. That's a bit better. And so we're going to be putting this into the roughness. We'll put it in the roughness of the principled shader, and let's preview the principled shader. And then to adjust the colors, we can search for ramp, and we'll add a color ramp and drop it here. So let's just take the base color and make it darker so you can kind of see what's happening. So if you kind of drag these around or change the colors, that's going to change the roughness, so it'll make it lighter and darker, and that'll make it more rough or more shiny. So I'm going to drag this tab over here and this tab over here just a little bit so it's a bit more contrasted. And so if you kind of look in the reflections, you can kind of see what it's doing. And then as for the colors, I'm going to make this kind of like a grayish color, kind of a mid-gray, and you can punch in 91, 91, 91 for the hex value if you want to use the same color. And then for the lighter color here, this is just a little bit lighter, and the hex value is D8, D8, D8. So there's just a little bit of roughness variation. Then I also want to add some bump, so we're going to add another noise texture. We'll drop this down here, and we'll put the vector into the vector of the noise. Now let's preview the noise texture, and I'm going to make the scale like a 20, and I'll turn the detail to a 10, and I'll turn the roughness up to a 0.55. So now let's put the factor into the normal, but then to convert to bump data, we want to search for a bump node. Let's preview the principled shader, and we're going to put the bump here in between the noise and the principled, and the noise factor can go into the height value to convert it to bump data. Now I do want to make it very subtle, so let's take this distance, and I'll turn it to a 0.0002. So there we go, so it's quite subtle, so just a very subtle bump over that surface. Now what I want to do is search for the ambient occlusion node, and we're going to use this to make the colors, so we'll put the ambient occlusion into the base color, and then let's turn on the only local, and that way it's not going to affect the ambient occlusion where it would be next to another object. If I preview the ambient occlusion, if the only local is off, there's kind of like a darkness around the corners here, but I'm just going to turn that off. You could keep it on if you want to, but I'll just leave it off so the other objects, like when an object gets close to it, it's not affected by the other object. Now I want to add a color ramp, so I'll just duplicate this color ramp and drop it here, and I'll preview the principled shader. So let's just drag these tabs around, and what I also want to do is make it much darker to make the colors. So I'm going to make this gray color fully black, and this other gray color, this is going to be a very, very dark gray. So if I preview it now, let's just make it a little bit brighter. See what that's looking like. So you can see it's very gray with black on the edges. And if you want to use the same hex code, it's going to be a hex code of 1B, 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 and then the other one is just fully black. Let's preview the principled shader now. So there we go, there are the dark hubcaps. And I think maybe this noise here could be a little bit smaller. So let's turn the scale to just like a 10 instead. And also this scale, maybe turn this to like a 10 instead. I think that's a little bit better. So we can now hide the hubcaps, just hit H to hide that. And now we are going to be adding in the procedural smooth rubber material. So I already created a tutorial a little while back on how to create that material. So if you want to watch that video, link is in the description. Or if you want to purchase the procedural material, you can also purchase it with the links in the description on my Gumroad store and Patreon page and add it into the Blender file. Or if you're one of my customers of my Ultimate Blender Procedural Material Pack, then you can just search for the smooth rubber material and add it in. So here's the smooth rubber. So I would just like grab this and drop it onto the object. However, for those of you who maybe just created it in a different file, or if you purchase the material individually, I'm going to show you how to append it in instead. So you can click on File and Append. So I'm going to go to the project files of the procedural smooth rubber material, and I'll go inside the blend file, I'll go to material, and then add the smooth rubber material. So if I select the tire, we can click on the material dropdown, and we can type in smooth and just add the smooth rubber material. And then also on this little object here, let's search for smooth rubber material. Let's go back to the layout here, and we'll go into the rendered view, see how this is looking. So there is the smooth rubber material, but I do want to make some changes. So one thing that I want to do is select both of these objects, and we want to apply the scale because we didn't actually apply the scale when we scaled it down, so that is a better size now. So if I zoom in closely, you can see there's just like some little kind of roughness changes and stuff and a few little scratches here. But I mainly want to kind of look up here and see what the material looks like here. So let's go to the shading workspace, and I'll zoom close up, and then we can adjust the settings of the smooth rubber. So on the base color, I'm actually going to make it a very, very light gray. And then if I select the smooth rubber, I actually forgot to add the subsurface because sometimes rubber can look like it has a little bit of subsurface scattering to allow light to go through. So maybe I'll like add that in a product update of my Ultimate Material Pack. But what I'm going to do is hit Tab to go into the node group, and I'm going to go over here to the principled shader, and I'll open up the subsurface, and then I'll turn the weight to like a 0.5, so half of the subsurface. And I can see just on the very, very corners of the rubber, it just looks a little bit kind of rubbery and soft because there's light going through the mesh. So it looks very, very slightly red. And then I'll hit Tab to go back out of the node group, and then if we want to, we can play around with like the bump strength and also like the scratches bump strength. So whatever you want to do, you can also like play around with the roughness. So I'm going to turn the roughness value to a 0.6 so it's more shiny. And then the noise bump strength, I'm going to turn this to a 0.02 so it's a little bit more smooth. So it's going to be an even smoother, even softer rubber. So a little bit smooth, a little bit soft, and a bit more shiny. So I can now just hide this object and hide this object as well. So we are almost finished. So now what we need to do is just create the fabric material. So we'll just select one of the objects, we'll add a new material, and I can just call this fabric. So I'm going to be using the principled texture setup to add in the textures, and we can do this because we have the node wrangler enabled. So I'll hit Ctrl-Shift-T. And then I'm going to locate to the folder where I have the fabric textures. So again, you can download them with the links in the video description. They'll also be provided in the tutorial project files if you purchase the project files. So if you downloaded it from polyhaven.com, you'll just extract the zip file and go into the folder. And I'm going to select the normal, roughness, and diffuse. There may be some other ones, but I'm just going to select these three and then do the principled texture setup. So you can now see we have the base color, the roughness, and the normal has been set to non-color, the roughness has been set to non-color, and the base color has been set to sRGB. So that's all correct. Now what I want to do is use the box projection so we don't have to use the UVs. And then what we can do is hold down the Shift key and select all these 3 textures at once. Then we can hold down the Alt key and we'll click on the flat and change that to box, and that's going to change it for all of them at once. And then hold down the Alt key and click on the blend, and with the Alt key held down, I'll type in 0.2 and then enter. And because we held down the Alt key, it's going to do that same setting for all of the different textures. So now it's nicely placed on the objects without any UV unwrapping. And then let's go here to the mapping, and I'm going to turn the scale down to like a 0.5 because I think it was a little bit too small. But if I zoom in closely, you can kind of see that texture. So now what we want to do is just click and drag and drop the fabric onto all of these different objects. And then I do also want to make the fabric a little bit darker, but first let's just drag and drop, or you can just like click here, click on the drop down and type in fabric. Or another way to do this is to click and select all the objects and then select one last with the fabric and do Control L and link the materials so they all have the same material. Now for these little pieces down here, we can just search for the inside gray material and just add the inside gray material to those objects. So let's go back to the fabric. So I just want to adjust the colors a bit. So I'm going to search for ramp and add a color ramp and drop this here. And we're going to drag the black over a little bit to make it a bit darker. And I'll drag the white over a little bit. And then we'll take the white color and make it kind of gray, because I do want the seats to be a pretty grayish color. And if you want to use the same hex code, you can punch in 959595. So just a nice gray color. So now the seats look a lot dark. All right, so we'll hit Alt H to unhide all the objects. And I'm going to go back to solid view. So let's go back here to the layout. And let's open up the outliner, and before we actually finish this up and render everything, I want to kind of reorganize these. So let's turn on the ones with the finished materials. Let's open this up, and we're going to click on the first one, hold down the Shift key and click on the bottom one, and we're going to move these into the Cybertruck collection. Select all of these ones as well and move them into the Cybertruck collection. So now the finished materials one, we can delete this, and let's also take the wheels. We're going to put these in the Cybertruck. We're basically going to move all these into the Cybertruck collection just so we have one collection for the Cybertruck. So you can see the arrows are now missing on these ones. So if I hold down the Shift key, select all of them, there's no arrows, so there's nothing actually in the collections. So we'll just right click and delete them. And the seats as well, we'll move this into the Cybertruck. And we'll shift select these, move them into the Cybertruck, and then delete that collection. So now we have the lights and camera, and if I select the ground object, let's make sure we move this into the lights and camera. So we have the lights and the camera and the ground, and then we have the Cybertruck, then we have the other different reference images, the backup, and the blockout. So things are pretty organized now. So let's just take a look at the final things. This is looking really cool, so you can definitely adjust the lighting. You can kind of move the lighting around. You can also rotate the HDRI. You can also move these lights around here, so maybe I'll move this down a little bit and a bit farther back. You can also rotate the sunlight and kind of get that to where you like. And then also this front light, so kind of move this around. All right, but that's looking pretty good. And of course you can move the camera view around, but the Cybertruck model is completely finished. So we're just going to render the scene and do some compositing. So if we go to the render properties and open up the sampling, I'm going to turn the render samples to 400, and then I'm going to turn on the render denoise. So we'll save the project, and then I'll click on render and render the image. All right, so the render is finished. So let's just jump over to the compositor, click on use nodes, and then what we're going to do is search for the glare node. Let's drop the glare node here. We're going to add a little bit of glare so that like the lights are glowing. And I'm going to change the streaks type to bloom instead. And then maybe I'll turn the size a little bit more down because I don't want it to be too big. So kind of just a small glare like that. We're also going to search for an alpha over so we can make a background color. So we add an alpha over, we'll put the image into the bottom image there. And this top image, that can be whatever color you want. So you could make it like a specific color or something. You could also add some sort of background image. I'm just going to make it kind of like a grayish color. So something like that. So we'll hit F11, and F11 is going to go to the render result, and we can click here on the render result here and type in viewer and add the viewer node. Now there are just a couple of things that I would probably fiddle around with. So like here, the surface imperfections are slightly too strong. So I would just slightly change the surface imperfections. And then also I would probably change the lighting here to make that slightly less bright because it's a little bit bright here. So if I just go back to the layout real quick, what I could do is just take this sunlight and maybe rotate it around a little bit. that might look a little bit better. Just kind of play around with the lighting and reflections and things. And then also as far as the surface imperfections go, we can go here to the shading. We'll go into the rendered viewport mode. And let's just zoom in here. And what I want to do is go to the render properties and turn off the denoise on the viewport just so we can see this showing up. So now if we take this light color, we can just make this slightly darker, because if it's darker, it's going to be less visible. So if we preview the hue saturation value, you can see here on the lighten, if I make it brighter, it's more visible. If I turn it down, it's going to be less visible. So I'd probably just turn this slightly farther down so the surface imperfections are a little bit more subtle. Maybe even slightly more subtle than that. Just make this color slightly darker so the surface imperfections are barely there, but they're very, very hard to notice. So you'll mostly just notice them in the reflections. So then once you've rendered the scene, you can click on image and just click on save as and save your project. And so that's going to wrap up this tutorial series on how to create the Tesla Cybertruck in Blender. So thank you so much for watching the tutorial series, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you watched through the entire tutorial series, then leave a car emoji in the comments, because I'd like to know who watched the entire tutorial series. And if you'd like to help support the channel and purchase the finished tutorial project files to get all the resources, the textures, the 3D model, and the renders, then you can purchase on my Gumroad and Patreon, so links are in the description. And thank you everyone so much for your support. Now, if you have a specific car in mind that you'd like me to make a tutorial about, then do leave that in the comments, because you know, the Cybertruck is a very different looking car. Most cars are like very smooth and round. So if you'd like me to make some other car, like maybe a sports car or just like a more regular car, then let me know in the comments what type of car you'd like to see, and maybe in the future sometime I could make a different car tutorial series, maybe like a sports car or something like that. And then before I wrap up the video, I wanted to let you know about another tutorial series you might be interested in watching, and that is my biplane tutorial series. So I created that biplane tutorial series earlier this year in 2025, and that's by far my largest and longest tutorial series that I've ever made. And throughout that tutorial series, I show you the complete process on how to create this realistic biplane 3D model. So that's completely free on my YouTube channel, so if you want to check it out, I'll have the links in the video description. But that'll wrap it up for this video, so I hope you enjoyed the tutorial series, and thank you for watching.